Producer Rob is here. Good morning.
How are you, Tim?
You're looking really, really sharp and in focus. In particular, I think there's something about this week that's happened to your brain.
Yes, been through the hoops, made to jump through them via these exams to test whether my cognition is up to scratch or not.
Now, if not physically jumping through hoops, mentally. Now, this is not an MRI, so it's not a brain scan, but you had to do things like follow coloured dots while wearing virtual reality goggles. So if you can imagine that, big googly goggles. You had to try and balance on a foam pad with your eyes closed and use a head-mounted laser to try and understand the relationship between your neck and your perception. So these are the kinds of tests that you have done. What's the verdict?
Well, there were some things that were clearly evident before we even sort of walked out of the practice room, before the test went away for analysis, that I was struggling in. Balancing on the foam pad was a big one, especially there's one where you have to kind of lift your leg and balance on the foam pad with your eyes closed. I was off with that. There was a couple with my neck, and when I went into these tests, I did think that perhaps the blows to my neck that I've suffered in my career have actually been more detrimental than the ones direct to my head. I've probably in 30 plus years only think I've been severely concussed twice, which I think is quite lucky for the amount of boxing and league that I did. But I've had a few around my neck that have worried me. And this is what Dr. David Hendrey, who did the exam, said to me.
It was pretty obvious when we had a look at how well your neck was moving, or more particularly how well it was not moving. I had a sneak peek at your x-rays when I took them, and it was pretty easy to see that there were some issues going on there. It wasn't lined up well from the front or from the side. We know that you've had a number of head contacts through there. One of the things that we're looking for with the brain health space is if you've got a trauma to the neck, we call that a whiplash, the same mechanism to the brain and the brain stem causes the concussion stuff. The other thing that was really obvious on the balance was you're overcompensating with your eyes because your inner ears aren't getting the messages through very well. So you know how we had you on that foam pad? That foam pad takes away the proprioception from your body, and then when your eyes are closed, you can't rely on your eyesight to keep yourself balanced.
He seems too calm in that delivery.
He is. It's strange receiving this news and thinking, oh, this is not life-altering at all. But one of the interesting aspects of that is I've thought about my balance for maybe 15 years or longer, and I always thought it was a result of my knee. So I've had a lot of problems with my left knee in particular. I had a couple of surgeries on it, and I thought my balance was out because of that and my ankles. And he's saying, no, it's because of your inner sense of balance. So that's, quite shocking to find. But it wasn't all bad news. And he said this to follow up with.
And I was really impressed with a number of different things. So most movement of the eyes are reflex movements. And so we have the way if something comes into our field of vision, we need to be able to follow that. We need to be able to track that. The movement and coordination between your neck and your eye movements was really good. Really happy with that. There's 61 metrics that we measure, and you had 59 out of 61 in good ranges.
Oh, nice.
So really, really happy with that. The good thing is we can use what's working well with you to apply the principles of neuroplasticity to stimulate those areas that aren't working so well.
Yeah, mate. And so there was one, aside from the balancing, that I really struggled with, and I'll explain what that entailed. So I'm wearing the goggle headset, but instead of me following the dots like I was in various other ones, this one, it just went completely pitch black, so I could not see a thing. And then I had to rotate my head as far to the left as I could possibly do it comfortably while keeping my body facing forward, and then go back to where I thought was the center in front of my face. And while I did that completely oblivious, he had a target that he'd printed on the wall. Then I had to go to my right and do it. And I did it, I'd say 5 times to each side of my body. When I removed the goggles and saw the target, what I could see is every time I returned to my left and came back to center, I was within about 10 centimeters of each other. It was very accurate. If I turned to my right and then went back, it was completely like someone had shot the wall with a shotgun. It was all over the place. And he talks a little bit more about that here.
And the motion through there wasn't symmetrical. The way your brain reads or thinks of what's happening is off. So if we're Think of it like a tunnel ball. If someone's out of line on the tunnel ball, we're not going to have good information going in. So the information from your neck to your brain is not accurate, and we're seeing that on that laser test. The messages from your neck to your brain about the position, really not that good along that horizontal to the right.
Yeah, so the good thing with these, even though it sounds pretty heavy, the good thing is with this, because most of it is about neck alignment, I can do a fair bit to get back that function and to work on those. One thing I was worried about was if I go further into competitive sport, I do a little bit, nowhere near as much as what I used to. If I went in with these kind of sensory, a lack or deficiencies there, is it going to stop me from being able to tell where the sideline is or to be able to turn in traffic and catch a ball if I'm perhaps blindsided? But the Dr. David Hendrey said to me, there's actually another risk from this, which I didn't think about at first, but makes a lot of sense.
Your brain tells your body to do something, and it's not quite right. So that being not quite right makes you 3 times higher risk of an ACL injury. So we see a lot of sports people who their brains aren't as healthy as they want. The messages to the brain from their body is not as clean as what we want, and so they're at risk of an injury.
Yeah, that's a big one for me because I want to avoid an ACL injury, which is your anterior cruciate ligament in your knee. I want to avoid that at all costs. So
for those who play competitive sport, there's a higher risk.
Mm-hmm.
ABC Sunshine Coast breakfast producer Rob Bergen here just had a bit of a brain test after playing lots of contact sport now. So you had some good news from Dr. David Hendrey there, some news which maybe was a bit concerning. For someone who's at your age, at your stage, having the love of sport that you do, I mean, what was some of the big takeaway for you for people who might be involved with sport? Is it to proceed with caution, to take a pause and get this baseline measurement? I mean, what's been your big lesson from this?
Well, I'd definitely say that balance, I should have really checked on that a lot earlier. Perhaps at the back of my mind, I had a suspicion it had something to do with this, but it was easier for me to think about it as a functional aspect of my body rather than something in my central nervous system. I think I'm fairly happy that 59 out of the 61 were good. And in fact, on the vision tests, and I've worked in front of big screens all the time, he said that my vision tests were pretty much in the 90th percentile. I was really did quite well there. So that was heartening to know, especially for my career going forward. But I think we still want to know if there's, if it's a bit overbearing, it's still good to know these things so you can work on them and try and improve for the rest of your life and get quality of life out of that time.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you, Rob.
Cheers,
producer Rob there. Now, his work was done with Dr. David Hendrey from the company Brain Excellence. And Dr. David is looking to do these measurements, these tests with not just people who play contact sport. Maybe you've had a one-off concussion in the years gone by and actually want to get this measurement done to see how your brain is now and maybe then compare it into the years into the future. So if you just Google Brain Excellence, you'll find some of the work that Dr. David Hendrey is doing.